नहीं जाती थी, घर ही रहती थी, खेत में काम करती थी। पंचायत में क्या क्या होता, ग्राम सभा में क्या नहीं होता, पहले कुछ भी नहीं पता चलता था। दीदी हम ग्राम सभा में जा नहीं रही थी। फिर सचेत परियोजना चालू हुई तो मैंने सोचा कि सचेत दीदी बन जाऊं और सारी ट्रेनिंग अटेंड की मैंने। पंचायत में ग्राम सभा हो तो क्या क्या सवाल करना है और क्या मुद्दा रखना है सब पता है मेरे को।
All our programs exclusively work with women. We call them change vectors, and we have created a program. We have given them a platform. We have given them new knowledge, new skills, new technologies to work and bring about change in their own villages.
पूरे गांव की दीदी होगी तो बदलाव बहुत जल्दी ला सकेंगे। दीदी सब साथ मिलके ग्राम सभा में मुद्दे रखी। फिर नई आंगनवाड़ी बन गई। आंगनवाड़ी की पानी की सुविधा भी हो गई। इधर रास्ता खराब था तो वहाँ रोड सही करवाना है करके मुद्दा रखा तो चल के इतनी दूर नहीं आना पड़ता। वो गाड़ी फिर अभी वहाँ जाने लगी।
मेरा जन्म हुआ है बहुत गरीब परिवार में, तो स्कूल में जा पाई थी। मेरे भी 3 लड़के हैं तो पढ़ाई लिखे रहे तो कितना अच्छा रहे। सहमति से मेरे मन से मैं नाम दिया शिक्षा की बदलाव दीदी में। मेरे को ट्रेनिंग मिला तो मैंने खुद सीखा आ की मात्रा और जोड़ करना घटाना सीखी।
Education critically determines the choices we have in life, and that's why TRI focuses on primary education in the villages to ensure that she has age-appropriate learnings and she can be what she wants to be.
मैंने सोचा कि जो भी बच्चों स्कूल में नहीं आ रहा है इसको हम लाएंगे और ऐसे गांव में जो बच्चों नहीं आते हैं इस बच्चों की माता पिता को समझा के तो फिर ऐसे करके 25 बच्चों की 1 महीना में हमने उपस्थित करवा दिया।
पहला वर्ष और दूसरे वर्ष।
शादी होने के बाद में हम गर्भवती हुए तो डिलीवरी के समय हमारे बहुत सारी परेशानी आई। तो डिलीवरी के समय खिलाते हैं वो भी पैसे भी नहीं मिले, जाते भी नहीं थे आंगनवाड़ी में, अस्पताल भी नहीं जाता था, टीका भी नहीं लगवाता था। ऐसी परेशानी कोई दूसरी दीदियाँ के नहीं होनी चाहिए। तो फिर इनके लिए बदलाव दीदी बना और आंगनवाड़ी में काम करा।
It has been scientifically proven that malnourishment leads to permanent impairment of cognitive and physical development. So therefore, TRI works with young infants, adolescent girls and pregnant mothers.
बदलाव दीदी बनने के बाद किशोरी बालिका खाने लगी थी आयरन की गोली और महिला भी के हम भी आवांगा टीकाकरण लगावांगा हमारा सोरा के लिए और अपने घर के आसपास जगह में ही पोषण वाटिका वाओ तो ये अपने घर की खावांगा तो अपन बीमार नहीं होवांगा।
Secure incomes drive our dreams, make it real. That's why it is important to go beyond infrastructure and skills. It is important to connect them with markets.
अरविंद भाई ये जो दलालों से कांटेक्ट करते हैं और मैं किसानों से माल उसकी क्वालिटी देखता हूँ।
मैं जितने भी बायर होते हैं उनसे कांटेक्ट करता हूँ, रेट का कंफर्मेशन करके रेट का मेंटेन करना। किसान को ये फायदा हो रहा है कि ज़्यादा पैसा मिल रहा है मंडी से, उसके बाद में किसान को मंडी जाना नहीं पड़ता है।
हमारी इनकम सालाना बहुत कम होती थी। TRI से जुड़ने के बाद हम जो उद्योग से जुड़े जो हमारी आय लगभग 3 गुना 4 गुना बढ़ गई। बहुत सारी कंपनी हैं जो हमारे कांटेक्ट में हैं। हमारा जो खुद का उद्योग है जिससे कि हमें भी रोज़गार मिले और लोगों को भी रोज़गार मिले ताकि उनको पलायन नहीं जाना पड़े।
हमारा ये काम है एज गवर्नेंस एज एडमिनिस्ट्रेटर्स कि हम कम्युनिटी के साथ जितना कम्युनिकेशन बना सके उतना अच्छा है। TRIF वो प्रोफेशनलिज्म वो डेटा ड्रिवन अप्रोच लेकर के आती है, साथ ही साथ इनके जो चेंज वेक्टर्स होते हैं that is a very good example of decentralized democracy working at its best, and I think TRIF has done a good job.
Mahendra Mathur takes this conversation with new age companies around tech solutions that can transform lives, livelihood, and rural societies like never before. This conversation with techpreneurs brings ideas and real-life solutions to advance economic opportunities, access to health, and improved education outcomes through public, private, community pathways. And now hand over the call to Shrish to take the session ahead.
Thank you, Chavi. So good evening, good afternoon, and good morning, everyone, based on the time zone you have joined us from. And a warm welcome to the 11th session of the India Rural Colloquy. The previous sessions have been quite insightful and enriching, and we are confident that your participation in the subsequent discussion shall make this session a cracking one too. Our theme for this session, Technology for Rural, emanates from the emerging needs and aspirations of the rural, and to harness the potential that remains untapped due to disproportionate access. In the history of industrial or technological revolutions, a unique defining technological spin has improved average income and quality of life exponentially. What we could term as the third techno-industrial revolution, which continues to present times, is characterized by the advent of digital technologies driven by the change from mechanical or analog electronic to digital electronics, and resulting in the widespread adoption of digital computers. As a country, we were late in adopting the new wave. However, a section quickly adopted and rode the wave. Bangalore, Pune, Hyderabad, the new Silicon cities became mega cities with concentrated wealth. Whereas rural India, beset with poor education, poor connectivity, and low investment, continued to languish and couldn't connect to the new wave of prosperity and fell behind. This digital divide became even more prominent during the last 1.5 years of pandemic, where we saw the rural falling significantly behind. It is this wide urban-rural opportunity divide that TRIF intends to and has been trying to bridge. The divide that renders millions of people unutilized and underutilized. TRIF believes that technology is the lever that can expedite the achievement of this goal at scale. We are now at the cusp of fourth technology wave powered by cloud, social media, mobile, the Internet of Things, and artificial intelligence, along with increasing computing power and data. It's this power of the new technologies that excites to transform quality of life, transform opportunities for intergenerational mobility, transform wealth creation in villages. I remember during my time in remote Dantewada district of Chhattisgarh back in 2012, there were incidences of Adivasis burying their radio sets that they got under a Sarkari scheme, personifically thinking that the radio has passed away after its battery had drained completely. From there, the situation has changed, with internet penetration in rural increasing at a rapid speed of 13 to 15% annually, in comparison to 4% in the urban areas. Smartphones have penetrated most households, and the same Adivasi people now may carry them. It is now incumbent on the government and society, the development sector, and the private sector to come up with innovative solutions that harness the power of technology to connect them to markets and gig economy. The SSG Didis of Abujamad no more should close operations due to lack of planning. Or the farmers of Palamu no more should fall prey to intermediaries due to lack of access to markets. Technology should not only come to their aid, but should empower them. TRIF, along with its partner Linkvani, intends to unlock technology pathways for new rural to explore new productive value creation opportunities and delivering quality of life services to advance human dignity and better life, as in being and functioning of healthy, better nourished, better educated, productive jobs. In the last few years, especially in the new millennium, some brilliant innovative initiatives have been undertaken in the sector that not only have improved the efficiency and reach of the solutions and services across sectors, but have also taken a more humane, people-centric approach in both design and delivery. In today's session, we'll hear from our panelists such great stories that have transformed the lives in rural societies through their technology interventions. We have an exciting panel with us today, the details of whose work can be found on our India Rural Colloquy webpage. We have Sunandan Madan, who is the co-founder of Dhvani, a rapidly growing technology-driven data analytics firm. We also have Shrikant, who is currently the CEO of Khosla Labs, a startup incubator that is looking to create and nurture startups using technology and entrepreneurial zeal to address key challenges. Neha Verma is the co-founder and CEO of Intel Health, a telemedicine technology nonprofit that delivers health services where there is no doctor. And Kate Ko is the program officer, agriculture advisory services at the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation with focus on digital innovations. I now hand over the session to Hemendra Mathur, who is the host conversant for the session, and look forward to a cracking conversation with the great panel and participants that we have with us today. I would urge everyone to actively participate in the discussion by posting your questions in the Q&A box and general comments in the chat box. We'll take the questions after the panel discussion. Over to you, Hemendra. Thank you.
Thanks, Shirish, for setting the context, and thanks to Anish and the entire TRIF team for inviting me to host this a session, which I find very interesting and very contextual. And I welcome all the panelists. We have wealth of experience between all the four panelists. I hope I can do justice to their experience in next 1 hour or so. So let me just spend a minute or two on setting the context. As Shri mentioned, this whole digital divide between Bharat and India, I think it's so much talked about. And, we are seeing a lot of undercurrents in terms of how new technologies are getting adopted in rural areas. I come from a venture capital sector, and a lot of my investments are in the agri-tech space. And I'm often asked this question, are farmers ready to adopt new innovations? And my answer is emphatic yes, with what I have seen in the villages. As long as farmers see that the solution can improve his or her farm economics, so solutions around market linkages, solutions around price discovery, solutions around warehousing, processing, ability to buy inputs directly, which can optimize the input cost, ability to access institutional credit, insurance products. I think if you provide this solution, which has a direct impact on farmers' income, by which he can earn, let's say, 20% more, or let's say save 10-15%, that is what is driving adoption of a lot of innovation in the farming community. We did some study and we found that out of 150 million farmers in India, at least about 15 million have adopted some sort of agri-tech solution, which is largely digital, but also includes some non-digital applications on agri-biotech and stuff like that. So I think that's a very positive news, and I'm very sure the way things are changing in rural areas in terms of access to broadband, access to 4G, improving penetration of smartphones. I think a lot of these changes will get accelerated in time to come. So I'll stop here and let me bring in our first panelist, Shrikant. As Shri mentioned, he doesn't need any introduction. Shrikant, my question to you is, what was your experience of the rollout and usage of Aadhaar in rural areas? And how can we bring about financial inclusion of rural India, both from a perspective of account opening as well as improving access to credit? Shrikant, over to you.
All right, thanks, Hemendra. Wonderful to be here today. Well, I was the CTO of the Aadhaar project, and I created the technology center in Bangalore, along with, of course, a huge team that we had, a fantastic team. And I'd like to relate maybe a sort of, the first project we took up was a pilot project in Mysore for LPG gas cylinder rollout. And I just want to take this example to show you what the impact of such digital transformation can be. Within the first year of operation of this Aadhaar-based LPG gas deduplication, where people were using multiple gas cylinders, shut it down and they started using one, so that they freed it up to so many of our rural citizens, the government saved over 8,000 crores in the first project, in the first year alone. And the cost of Aadhaar is less than 8,000 crores. So I just want to make the point, well-designed digital interventions will make massive impact. The return on investment of a project like that was massive. Very first project, very first pilot across India, basically paid back the entire cost of Aadhaar. Another sort of more sort of an anecdotal input, we rolled out Aadhaar for NREGA cash payments in Jharkhand as one of the very first projects. Dr. R.S. Sharma, who was the Director General, was earlier the Chief Secretary of Jharkhand. So he tested out Aadhaar for NREGA payments. And it turned out it was strange. We heard at our Delhi and other regional offices and in Bangalore that the women are very happy about this. And we were wondering why women, because NREGA has both men and women workers. And so what's going on? It so happens that earlier, before Aadhaar, a middleman used to go out and get the money back for a whole bunch of people, especially women were not going out there to the town or district headquarters or wherever, where the money was being paid for the NREGA. Now, since Aadhaar fingerprint had to be put to get your money, women had to themselves go and get their money Earlier, it turned out that they would not get much of it. So there was a large cut that either the middleman kept or whatever, the husband took it away or whatever. And now the women started participating in the financial, getting the financial rewards of the work that they had done in NREGA. Anyway, these were sort of just more anecdotal experiences. While there was a huge use in rural India, well, 49% of the population of the country has used Aadhaar to access.
Shrikant, we lost you. Shrikant, we lost you for a minute.
Sorry.
We lost you for a minute.
Sorry. Yeah, I was just saying that there was denial of services as well. While a lot of people benefited, about 0.8% of the people were denied services. So we have to fix those issues as well. So that was on the Aadhaar aspect of the question you asked me. Now on the financial inclusion part, I started a fintech name called NovoPay to address financial inclusion by, banks don't make too much money by opening bank accounts for the poor, rural poor. And hence you didn't see a huge amount of banks rushing into rural areas to open bank branches or accounts. So with the advent of mobile and internet, and especially Aadhaar, which gave the ability to do KYC easily at the edge, we were able to open, in kirana shops, in telecom shops, in little shops, using a smartphone, you could open like a bank branch using a BC network, where the kirana fellow himself opens bank accounts, is able to do deposits, withdrawals, and various payment services, as well as even lending, as we can see. So I think technology, with the help of a good identity system like Aadhaar, which can ensure authentication. Earlier, we needed a card, we needed a passbook, we needed all these complicated credentials in order to authenticate a person. And hence, since they didn't have it in the villages, rural folk, they were not part of the mainstream banking system. But now with Aadhaar access, as long as there is connectivity, and even low bandwidth connectivity is fine, you're able to authenticate them, you're able to give them a bank account, you're able to do financial transactions. Having said this, the credit situation is still not very good. As you are in that sector, the agri credit situation, while MFIs and SHEs have done an admirable job, still large banks giving credit to farmers, as well as going down to MSMEs, small micro enterprises in rural areas, is still there's a huge gap. I think we need to work on it. But I think the new technologies, OCAM, the flow-based lending technologies, where you're not just looking for secured lending, because there's not a huge amount of assets to go by before a small SME can get a loan in the rural setting. So I think OCAM-based, flow-based lending, unsecured lending for MSMEs by mainstream banks, I think is not just banks, but NBFCs, MFIs, and so on, is certainly going to, I think, increase. Government's doing a lot towards that. And I think RBI has also been proactively pushing for financial inclusion. So I'm very hopeful that these digital technologies, whether it is Aadhaar, UPI, OCAN, and so on, will sort of start delivering services to rural areas.
Thanks, Shrikant, for wonderful remarks. And clearly, all of us acknowledge the role Aadhaar has played in driving the inclusion of underserved communities across India, and especially in rural India. But as you rightly said, a lot has to be done. The PSL lending for agriculture is about $200 billion, but only 30% of farmers have access to institutional credit. And the 70% who are left out, essentially smallholder farmers, with a cost of credit like 2 to 5% a month. So you are right, we need many more innovations. We are already seeing some intersection of agri-tech and fintech, which I'm very excited about. I'm sure solutions around farmer credit scoring, risk assessment, mitigation, loan recovery can solve some of the problems that banks face while lending to farmers. So thanks very much, Shrikant. I'll come back to you. With that, I'll move to Kate. Kate has done lots of work in conceptualizing and building digital farmer services platform for the farmers. Kate, what according to you is needed to drive farm income for small scale producers. If you look at India, 85% of farmers are small scale. So we need to solve for them, right? And what kind of technology intervention would work, given your experience in this sector? Kate, over to you.
Thank you, Homendra, and good evening, everyone. It's really a pleasure to be here with all the participants as well as the illustrious panel. And thanks for the introduction. So yeah, Homendra, today I'm going to focus on talking about agriculture, as you've already touched on, and I'll be really focusing on the smallholder agriculture segment. So as you had already stated some of the statistics, over 70% of the world's poor work in agriculture. And actually globally, 5 out of 6 farms are considered smallholder farmers, and they produce 35% of the world's food. So agriculture is the predominant employment sector in rural areas. So it's impossible to make a dent in poverty and to positively impact rural areas without talking about ag. So small rural farmers need a lot of things to succeed, which many of you are familiar with, right? So we need the right inputs, we need the right production technologies, whether it's for crop farmers or livestock farmers. Farmers also need the right knowledge on how to succeed in farming and produce quality products. And of course, they need the right buyers and they need a good price for their products. Digital technology can play a role across all of these areas. Today, I particularly want to focus in on the farmer knowledge and advisory piece, which we believe is one area in which digital technology can really benefit. So farmers need access to high quality information to be good farmers. High quality information means customized information, relevant and timely information. Traditionally, this advice would be conveyed by, for example, public extension workers or local input providers, fellow farmers in the community, or even it would be knowledge passed down in their families. This is an area where technology as a tool can make a huge difference because technology has the ability to share information faster, cheaper, at wider scale, with more standardization and more customization. Technology has the power to integrate multiple data sets, which has the effect of producing more customized content. So specifically, what types of digital tech innovations are most relevant to small-scale producers? I would say that innovations that support end-to-end decision support systems are most needed. So these decision support systems can broadly be defined in 2 different categories. The first category is innovations in front-end access. So farmers need access to this knowledge and advice somehow, right? So we're talking about technology. They need access to this knowledge through the technology. So some sort of front-end channel or modality, which is tech-enabled, is needed. So this could be either the direct-to-farmer modality, so that could include radio, a simple technology like radio, or integrated voice response, otherwise known as hotlines, or an app through a smartphone. Or, as one of the participants had already stated in the chat, this could be through a human intermediary, which is very important in a lot of our country contexts. So this could be, again, through an extension worker, through some kind of a service provider, or through a women's smallholder SHG group. And this person would have access to the technology, and then they can convey the information to the farmer. The second category is innovations in back-end data. So the information that farmers receive on the front end ideally would be supported by multiple content layers and data sets on the back end. Farmers need information customized to their specific conditions. This requires the coming together of multiple data sets on the back end that are relevant in agriculture, which are many. This includes weather, soil, land, water, commodity-specific production advice and best practices, market and pricing information and data sets, and pest and disease surveillance data sets. All of these data layers are quite complex to create and integrate, and they actually need to be integrated with farmer profiles in order to be customized.
Thanks, Kate. You raised some very relevant points in terms of integration and multiplication of multiple data sets and how we can convert into insights which farmers can use. Another important point to touch is involving the local communities, SSGs. And I see more of these models, though we call them digital, but there's a huge physical component, and that typically is the local FPO, local NGO, village level entrepreneurs. And I see that's probably be the case at least for the next few years, where the physical component will remain there. And that's where, in fact, I see huge opportunity for creating models around rural entrepreneurship, rural employment, which a lot of innovations can drive, So I think that's a positive aspect, and I see huge multiplier effect these solutions can create in the rural communities in terms of giving them alternate options of income. So thanks, Kate, for those remarks. So we move from agriculture to another important area, which is healthcare. And we are fortunate to have Neha with us today, who's an expert in this space. Neha, in COVID times, we kind of saw the huge digital divide between urban India and the rural India. While we were able to order our medicines and our tests online, and there was a lot of pickup in telemedicine, teleconsultation, e-pharmacies, a lot of startups which are in this area raised a lot of money, became unicorns. But when it comes to rural areas, what's your sense? Is digital the way forward? And how technology can improve access to healthcare services for rural communities?
Thanks so much, Hemendra, and thank you everyone who's joined this panel as well as my fellow panelists. It's lovely to be here. You're very right. COVID, pandemics don't create, along with creating problems, they also exacerbate the problems that already existed. So problems of health access didn't get created during COVID. They've always been there in rural India. You don't have doctors in rural India. You have to travel to get to a place where you can get to a doctor, get to a diagnosis, get medications. It's and unless technology is a part of the ecosystem, these challenges will only continue to remain. And so, one of the interesting things that COVID has created is this greater adoption of technology for healthcare delivery in rural areas. We work mainly in the telemedicine space, and I'm very happy to report, like, one of the government's largest initiatives during COVID was eSanjeevani. Just to give you a context, within 1 year, eSanjeevani did 10 million consultations. Over half of those actually came from rural areas. They came from health and wellness centers, patients who would walk into a health and wellness center and get connected via an intermediary health worker to a doctor. I mean, it's not like how telemedicine operates for you and me in an urban setting where we pull out an app and we talk with a doctor and order medications. Unless the problem of smartphone ownership, internet access is solved, healthcare delivery for rural has to largely rely on these existing physical channels of healthcare clinics, healthcare workers that exist. And as you very rightly mentioned, just like in agri-tech, that creates opportunities for rural entrepreneurship in areas. There's also, of course, direct to patient kind of linkages that you can see with especially with telemedicine, with helplines. I mean, we've run almost 12 helplines in the last 1 year where patients in rural areas can get home care for COVID. Being at home, calling a number, and you see that the simpler the tech is, the easier it is for everybody to access. I think when you look at technology for rural health, you kind of see it coming into a couple of buckets. One are the kinds of interventions that are directed directly to the consumer. It's directed directly to that patient through either you're giving them information or you're giving them healthcare services, such as speaking with a doctor, by through phone lines, getting or an app. You do see, while we don't see a huge traction in app usage for healthcare in rural areas, you do see it high in the adolescent youth segment for, say, sexual reproductive health or information about to get information about adolescent health issues. Then there's the second category of interventions that target healthcare providers in rural areas. I mean, it's inaccurate to say that there are no healthcare providers in rural areas. There are ASHA workers, there are ANMs, there are community health officers. There is a vast network of NGOs that have healthcare workers, and these are the frontline providers of services. And so there's a lot of tech to empower them, make them more efficient, allow them to track people who come to them, allow them to track pregnant women, allow them to track kids and immunizations. And I think the third category also of interventions in technology are around diagnostics, lower cost diagnostics, cheaper diagnostics, which are able to improve screening and triage and care at that rural level. So I think all in all, technology does a lot to empower the end consumer, taking away so many of the channels that they need to access so they can get directly to what they need. It creates a lot in terms of building capacity of your frontline health workforce. It's a health workforce that's very overburdened, needs constant motivation. I mean, the pandemic's effects in rural India have been mitigated only and only through the tireless efforts of our ASHA workers that have been out in the communities doing COVID screening, testing, motivating patients to take vaccinations. You're seeing vaccine hesitancy cropping up in communities. So unless there is technology, it is hard to scale and sustain these interventions. And the appetite to adopt it is there. I mean, rural healthcare delivery has no option but to go digital if we have to, especially in this pandemic era where it is hard to get access. There's such a clear digital divide. Of course, gains in technology for rural health service delivery can only be fully realized when some of the basic infrastructure also improves, like internet connectivity, like phone ownership. And I think that's where it's not, you should look at not just health as one, but when all of our sectors, agri-tech, fintech, when they all kind of grow as a whole, it pushes that rural consumer more and more into digital empowerment, so as to speak. So it's a really great thing. And I think the conversation about rural health technologies cannot be complete without looking at the needs of rural women. They are even more so at the disadvantageous end of the digital divide. Their ability to access phones, their ability to access internet when and where they need it is usually mediated by the person in their family who owns the phone, which is usually not them. So when we talk about technology access, it's usually all around ICT, all around that smartphone or that simple feature phone. And there's so many innovations that are cropping up around that. And unless we have a clear lens on women, on consumers who are traditionally excluded from digital innovations, it's going to be hard for us to serve. Then we are only creating more haves and have-nots.
Thanks, Neha. You touched on multiple points. Great, insights into how rural healthcare can be further developed. And of course, kudos to ASHA workers. I think they played a very important role. So how much digital we can go, we would still keep on relying on these last mile, connectivity, which is, I think, ASHA workers provide. But you're right on telemedicine. I have known cases, people sitting in Kalahandi consulting a doctor at Apollo Hospital in Delhi, who could have thought that this would become possible. So of course it can't solve all the problem, but at least part of the problem can be solved if we build this access for rural communities. I will also touch upon another important aspect in healthcare, which farmers are worried about, that is animal healthcare. I can tell you that's another huge area. The veterinary services infrastructure is again very, very challenged. We don't have too many veterinary doctors, and some of them which are there in the villages are not genuine vet doctors. So I'm seeing a lot of platforms which are coming, which are providing veterinary services for animal healthcare on artificial insemination, on predicting disease, on providing solutions online, and farmers are adopting it because they see a clear benefit. So I think huge potential area, and I'm sure it will pick up, as you rightly said, as we build digital highways for our rural community. So with that, I'll move to Sunandan, and Sunandan has again tons of experience in building this model. And my question to Sunandan would be more around adoption of these models. You dealt with rural communities at multiple levels. What are some of the challenges to adoption? How do we improve that? Is there a role of policy? Is there a role of, as Neha also mentioned, this last mile challenges? How do we train workforce who can deliver some of these services to rural communities? And what works, what doesn't work? And you can also mention about, are farmers sort of comfortable using app, downloading app, or, that's the question I'm asked multiple times. Or are they comfortable with some other digital mediums or non-digital mediums for that matter? So Sunandan, will be good to hear from you.
Yeah, thanks everyone. I think I'll divide maybe technology from two lenses when we say technology adoption in rural areas. So one is your end customers, like the farmers, and the other are the intermediaries or support staff, which are VLEs, ASHA workers, field cadres who are delivering these services. And these are very two important aspects, and the challenges are different for each of these two kind of people. With the field volunteers and the field cadre, it's a controlled environment. You can make them download an app, but the challenge is how do you invest in their training and capacity building? And it is also I have seen more of a mindset issue also, because they have been for last 10 years they have been accustomed to do work on a pen and paper, and somewhere technology is being looked at like a spying, someone is spying on you. But I think it has to be looked more of an as an enabling, how it's going to help you. Because it's look like everyone like, okay, we release an app, you collect data, someone will make sense of the data, but how is actually empowering the end customer, the field cadre to make decisions? So I think that mindset shift is important. Other thing is, I think the challenge with this sector is the localization of the content. When I say localization, we can't build one app and then maybe roll out pan India. So it has to be contextualized to the language, the offline capabilities, the multilingual part of it, and the information has to be locally collated. So I think these are the challenges on the field cadre side. On the end customer side, I think, which is like, I'll take example of FPOs, and then let's say if I have to build us an app for farmers wherein they can access information, we have seen personally there's a huge inertia nowadays to download a new app. When you have like a 5,000 rupees phone or 7,000 rupees phone, smartphone, there's a huge inertia to download, and the limited spaces. You have TikTok, there are so many apps, and I can't download too many apps. So I think WhatsApp is emerging as a good people. You don't need to spend too much time on training. People are already familiar on WhatsApp. So I think we have seen those kind of success stories coming out, wherein WhatsApp is being used as a channel to communicate or deliver certain services to the end beneficiaries. And the third challenge is, I think, in the entire ecosystem, I think like Aadhaar is a good example. And take example of a FPO ERP system. I think I know 10 FPO ERP systems. So the cost of the technology, Tally, for example, if you take an L1 license, it's 20,000 rupees a year, and no one can invest. It might have costed 10, 15 crores to build a Tally like of system. So how do you build public digital goods, like in maybe an ERP system, and then make it available to the organizations as an open source system maybe, and then so that they can use this system to deliver services on the ground. And it has to have a very plug and play architecture, so that it can then link it with your financial systems, payment gateways, loan credit systems. So yeah, I think that I feel is important to build more and more digital technology architecture based, and in healthcare, in agriculture. I mean, we can take several categories, and but build these kind of digital systems.
Thanks, Anandan. And I will echo your observations on apps. There are like hundreds and thousands of apps, and it's not easy for anyone to download and use it constantly. And you're right, I think WhatsApp probably is at the top of the heap, but other like YouTube and Facebook are other channels that I've seen a lot of farmers using. In fact, a lot of second-hand tractors in India are now sold on YouTube. You know, farmer just upload a 2-minute video of the tractor and we get code. So I think that's quite interesting. And another combination which I found very useful while communicating to farmers is combination of video, voice, and vernacular. You know, if you bring these elements, your sort of farmer's ability to absorb the message and understand the message becomes far more higher. And in fact, a lot of marketing, at least on agri input side, is more content-driven marketing. You know, a lot of these data gets designed and developed and uploaded on multiple platforms. So thanks, Nandan, for bringing these valuable insights to us. So maybe I'll go back to Srikanth again. And Srikanth, I've heard about this interesting model called 10-bed ICU, which you are associated with. Just want to understand how it is being rolling out, how it is rolling out ICU units in hospitals, government hospitals in rural areas, and there is a pandemic management tech platform attached to it. If you can share your experiences, how effective it has been, that would be very useful.
Certainly, Hemendra. Well, about 10 weeks ago, Delhi was gasping for oxygen. People were, affected in a massive way in Bangalore and Mumbai, a lot of areas. And, I was getting calls in the evening saying, Srikanth, my mother needs a ventilator bed. Drop whatever you're doing. Please find a ventilator bed. She needs it immediately or she's going to die. Okay. And for more than a week, every day, I was spending my evenings finding ventilator beds or whatever, ICU beds and so on. And then this was from the, swanky Bangalore infrastructure with a lot of hospitals, world-class hospitals, who still couldn't handle the caseloads that we were seeing with the Delta variant. And my friend, Dr. Sudarshan in Chamarajanagar, who runs Karuna Trust, and VGKK, he was telling me, Srikanth, your media is only focusing on Bangalore and Mumbai and Delhi. Rural is reeling under the onslaught of this virus. 200 of the 600 villages in Chamarajanagar were infected with large numbers of cases. And he was saying there are huge casualties and it's bad. So I was just, petrified. I mean, I know very little about healthcare. I worked on healthcare in the United States on Healthy on WebMD. That was many years ago. My wife works on it, on the non-communicable diseases for Ayushman Bharat, but I myself haven't. But I said, you know what, we can't sit on the sidelines, watch this happen. Let's jump in. So it occurred to me that rural India, especially government hospitals where much of the rural poor go to, we need to strengthen the critical care infrastructure. So we came up with this project called 10-bed ICU, of creating 10-bed ICU units in rural government hospitals, and started seeking funding from donors, NRIs in America, in companies in India, and so on. And it so happened within 7 days, we were able to fund 28 hospitals in Telangana, right? Lots of people came forward because they all were reading the same thing and their families were going through this virus and so on, the effects of the pandemic. So we realized that this is something that we need to do. And it was not only the governments that were really wanting this to happen, but also people were ready to step up and help. So we came up with this idea of not just equipment, because just rolling out equipment in a rural government hospital doesn't sort of lead to the outcomes that we want. So we said we need a digital platform to manage the pandemic, all the way from ICMR reports of RT-PCR positives and transitioning patients all the way through home isolation to COVID care centers at PHCs, to secondary hospitals, to tertiary hospitals, and all the way from general beds all the way to the oxygen beds and ICU beds and ventilators and so on, as well as the downshifting to ensure they get cleared up for others. So this team in Ernakulam put out this fantastic system, Corona Safe, which now is part of e-government's foundation, which Nandan Nilekani and I started in 2002 as an NGO. So so there is the equipment piece. There is the digital pandemic management piece, Corona Safe. We also built a tele-ICU module, and Neha, you're the expert in that area. We built this because we felt there's an acute shortage of intensivists, pulmonologists, anesthetists, and so on in rural India. And the few that were there went away, large numbers went away to the cities. So we needed to start using digital technology to get these specialists to help the local junior doctors and senior nurses and so on, in order to task shift some of the things that were only an intensivist could do. So we've just launched it last week in Ernakulam, and very interesting results, very early days. And the last part is, of course, training. Since this pandemic is ever changing, we have the Delta variant, now we have the Lambda variant, the white fungus, black fungus, and whatnot. We need to train our folks, and it's not as though somebody knows all about it. It's more of a discussion and debate and training. So these are the modules we put out. But to give you a quick sense of the progress we've made, we have over 30 hospitals live, 10-bed ICU units live in Telangana. We have about 30 more coming up in Andhra Pradesh. In the next 2 to 3 weeks, we'll be launching several of them. The equipment is being delivered. Karnataka, we're taking up 40. We've already funded. We've got funds for 40 hospitals in Karnataka. The governments, the state governments work with us. We sign an MOU with the state governments. We create a PMU, a project management unit, and work through it. And in the Northeast, which is actually being very badly hit, Assam is shut down, Manipur is also going through, Nagaland and other places are going through huge caseloads. We are taking up 118 hospitals where we are going to set up 10-bed ICUs. There's a huge amount of support, but I'd want to tell, since there's a large number of people here interested in rural India, I would say, please go to the website 10bedicu.org. We need all the help, but it is moving really quickly, and we are sort of happy with the progress that's being made.
Thanks, Srikanth. It's a great example of how healthcare facilities can be decentralized. If you look at whenever I visit any hospital in Delhi, be it AIIMS or GB Pant, I see 80% of the patients coming from rural areas in and around Delhi. And just imagine their fate, they have to figure out a way to find a good place to stay. There's additional financial burden on them, and and they lose. Some of them take leaves from their jobs and come with their fathers and mothers so that they get a treatment. So I really feel bad about that. Why can't we take these facilities to the area they belong? And this is a great model.
Just we just launched in a district called Adilabad in Telangana, northern district, tribal district. And what you said is absolutely true. There are a lot of cases, but the government hospitals are going, we don't know how to deal with this, go to Hyderabad. And a lot of people are dying on the way. More than 50% of them are dying in the little ambulance, Maruti ambulance that they're taking them because it doesn't have the right facilities. So we really can't deal with this situation where you need to be sent to a Delhi or you need to be sent to a Hyderabad or a Bangalore because a lot of people are going to die in that process. So we need to slowly improve the infrastructure, the critical care, the specialists available. If we don't, we need to train them. A lot of work needs to happen. And this pandemic has sort of opened up the underbelly of our poor healthcare system.
Absolutely, Sheikh. And I remember days when for any bypass surgery, you have to come to Escort in Delhi and few other hospitals in Bombay, and that's it. But fortunately, that has reached some tier 2 towns, and we get those facilities there. I'm sure the penetration can deepen further to some of the rural areas. Thanks, Srikanth. Kate, coming back to you, we all know the amount of work Gates Foundation is doing in agriculture area. I've been associated with some of your initiatives, and it's quite remarkable the amount of effort that you put in building farmer access to markets and platforms and services. So just want to understand how Gates Foundation is looking at this sector and where they would like to invest more if we look at agriculture sector in particular.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Hemendra. So at the Gates Foundation, our strategy is really focused on this poor farmer segment. So we call them small scale producers, pre-commercial producers. So we believe, as I've stated in the last segment, that small scale producers really need end-to-end decision support systems in order to help them make better decisions for their farms. And, as you all know, with a changing climate that's already impacting food systems around the world and will only get worse, particularly for poor and vulnerable farmers who may not have, adequate knowledge or measures when it comes to climate mitigation or adaptation at the least. We really need climate smart decision support systems that are tailored to smallholder needs. So I think our strategy will be increasingly focused on this climate piece. So we support digital innovations in these decision support systems, and this includes many different types of work that fall under this big category. So the first is inclusive front-end modalities that are able to reach as many farmers as possible. So Nay had touched on some of these topics of inclusion and gender. So some of these modalities are IVR, video, radio, app-based solutions. Again, these are the direct-to-farmer or direct-to-customer solutions. We're increasingly looking at voice-enabled technologies, so that would really address people who are not literate. We also work in the platforms and middleware that can integrate data sets on the back end and then deliver this and generate and deliver this data on the front end. We support the generation of these key back-end data layers, which some people refer to as AgStack, AgriStack, or Ag Data Ecosystem. And there's really 3 different types of data that we look at here on the back end. The first is farm data. So that's data within the boundaries of any farm. So includes soil condition, commodities grown. Second layer is really farmer level data. So this is data specific to the farmer. So that's farmer transactions, demographics, other household needs, production history, et cetera. And then the third is derived data sets. So this is data from remote sensing. And related to this issue, we work on all kinds of data issues. So data sharing, data standards, data privacy, the ethical use of data, enabling the farmer to really own their data. And finally, we support developing the business models and partnerships that really make these systems sustainable. So that Sunandan has touched on as well. You know, who's going to pay for these services over time? What kinds of partnerships are really needed to sustain them? The second big topic we invest in are innovative finance models and products that support small-scale producers specifically. So this includes blended financing, business model development, bundled products and financial services. And this could include payments, credit, savings, layaway plans, and insurance plans. And we're increasingly looking at alternative risk assessment models. And finally, we support scaled innovations in soil health, and this includes digital soil maps, which we have a long history in doing, soil diagnostics, and geospatial soil and agronomy R&D at scale. So pretty new and exciting areas for us. These soil health and agronomy investments aim to provide the key content pieces or the agri-intelligence on the back end for crop farmers that make up a big part of this decision support system.
Thanks, Kate. Again, you touched on some very, very important points. And I really liked the fact that you brought this whole angle of building a climate lens and a gender lens to agriculture. And you know, we always think that climate risk is problem for tomorrow's generation, but it's knocking at our doors. And I see agriculture being one of the most vulnerable area, which can adversely impact farm income on one end and food security on the other end. So it's something we need to address now. And clearly gender lens. I think most of us, when we think of farmer, we think of a man. But I see most of the agriculture in India, at least, going feminine, and especially sectors like dairy and poultry and horticulture are completely controlled by women. And I see even cereal crops and row crops becoming more feminine because we are seeing more mechanization, which can potentially, sort of make it more inclusive for women. So I think that's great. And of course, role of AgriStack, I am personally a big advocate of it. We need to build public data sets and reduce the transactional cost for banks, for startups, for industry to build the last mile access to farmers. And that's where, all these data sets will play a very important role. So thanks, Kate, for that. It's very interesting, the area that you have shortlisted for making intervention in the sector. Neha, coming back to you. So of course, I think lots been said, and we've heard from Shrikant also. What are the innovations that we need to make? What are the 2 or 3 things that we need to do so that adoption of technology when it comes to healthcare improves in rural areas? Do we need to make any big shift in a policy narrative? Do we need to sort of take a more micro view and train, let's say, more ASHA workers and stuff like that? What are 2 or 3 things which can create a large impact?
Yeah. Hemil, there's this app that you can download from the Play Store, and as soon as you install it on your phone, you will become healthy.
Oh, wow. This is a $1 billion
you will not
advice.
be poor anymore. It will pull you straight out of poverty. Let's be realistic. Technology is not the end solution to social issues, right? I really wish there was an app that could do that. Apps have helped. And apps help us find love, buy groceries, do banking. But at the end of the day, the technology solution only ends up being an enabler for people to create social change, right? So unless that technology is adopted by the change makers or the change agents in a community, the first and biggest issue of technology I've always faced in healthcare is adoption. How do you get the patient to adopt a technology-enabled solution? How do you get a health worker to start adopting or using an app or a particular device? How do you get the government to adopt a particular technology solution, right? So it starts off by that adoption. We also have a bit of fatigue because there's so many solutions out there and we are thrown to, I think Sunandan touched upon it. There's another app and another app to download. So you are looking at first and foremost an issue of adoption, and that's an issue which frankly a lot of for-profit companies, when you're building apps for things like finding a date or finding a cab, they've really been working a lot on the adoption. How do I hook that customer in their first point of use itself to keep using the system again and again? And so creating products that have engaging experiences, that's first and foremost, that's the case. The second is realizing that online channels cannot work unless there are offline channels to support it. I think I already touched upon there being a base level of infrastructure that needs to be available for any technology solutions to layer on top of, whether it's power, internet, access to devices. I think like building the product keeping in mind, or building the solution keeping in mind the unique needs of that consumer, and keeping a gender lens there, absolutely understanding what is needed for that person to be most effective when using this technology solution. So I think those are some of the things. I think from a policy space, there's a lot of work that's happening to drive adoption. There's a lot of great work, even policy space, happening on creating stacks where you can create aggregation of multiple solutions, whether it's being done with NGOs or it's being done with governments. We are a big proponent of the open source societal platform approach. So if you're creating a solution, if it is put out as a public good, if it's put out as something that can be adopted by different platforms, then you don't have to create multiple solutions anymore. You can collaborate. So one of the reasons why we love working with TRI was because they came to us and said that, we are working in this area, in these areas in Jharkhand for good governance and for improving the delivery of government services, and we want to work in improving the delivery of health services. And they looked and saw that we have an open source platform, and so this kind of collaboration and crosstalk that happens to work together across sectors, so important to really get the tech in effective. So I guess there's things we have to do at multiple levels, at the customer level, at the policy level, at the government level. Samaj and Sarkar really need to work on these aspects together. And I look forward to the day we just have an app and that we download and our solution is, our problem is solved.
I think you summarize it well. I think Samaj and Sarkar has to come together. App can just solve part of the problem, but not everything. So with that, I'll move to Sunandan. Sunandan, I think you've done phenomenal amount of work in rural areas, and I want you to talk about some of the partnerships that you've done with likes of Amazon and Mahindra, for enabling access of tech solutions to rural community. Can you give some examples? What are your learnings, and do you see this model scaling, in the future?
Yeah, I mean, Hemant, so I think in the couple of last 6 years journey, we might have built 150 software applications.
Oh my God, it's quite a bit.
Yeah, roughly working with and trying to work, the larger context is the development sector, but working through NGOs, government, and corporates. I'll talk about, take example in these three categories, how companies are using that. So for example, we are working with Walmart. So they are building we have built a technology solution wherein they are trying to link MSMEs with their global supply chain. So that is one example. Tata Trust. So generally we have a lot of macro planning. So we design any government policy and it's a more top down, while we work with Tata Trust and they have this plan to do a micro planning exercise. So how do you build village development plan which are based on the need of the community? So you reach out, you do a survey, you understand the infrastructure and the service situation, and then prepare a village development plan that gets segregated to a Gram Panchayat development plan, and that gets feed into the government system for accessing NREGA funds and the 15th Finance Commission funds. So how do you do a bottom-up planning? Another use case is we are working with the Hindustan Unilever Foundation, and they have a mandate to work in water. So water is an important subject, and there we are trying to leverage NREGA data sets. So what they're doing is they're trying to scrap data from the NREGA website and then mapping the NREGA works at a watershed level, while NREGA works at a Gram Panchayat level. But how do you make decisions what is happening at a watershed level? So that is an important area where HUL is working. Big Basket, I give one example. So they have this, they have built a price discovery system wherein based on the every morning 6 a.m. their Big Basket staff goes to the mandi, collect the daily prices of the commodities, and based on that they calculate the collection center. So they have village collection centers wherein farmers can visit and give their produce. So based on those today mandi prices, they will derive the collection center prices. And they have this big screen, and there you can see it's a very fair mechanism. So farmer has the option whether you can give to that collection center or you can go to the mandi and sell your produce. Vedanta Foundation, they work in Anganwadis. So they have a deep focus on Anganwadi systems, strengthening the Anganwadis. So they are using technology to monitor the infrastructure and the services, the nutritious, the midday meal, which is being given out in these Anganwadis. There's another example with the NGO which we are working with, the Saigal Foundation. So they are trying to see how it's like one of the initial, I think, first project of Dhwani. And in India, we have so many helplines. So there's a women helpline, there's a police helpline. And when you call that, if a person in Haryana calls to that helpline, maybe the line will direct to Chandigarh. And that person does not understand the local dialect. There's so many local dialects. And he will not have the local information. When my near block office opens up, what is the contact details? So we built a very basic IVR system, or kind of a toll-free helpline, which works on a mobile phone. And the idea was to be able to, it's called Citizen Information and Service Center. So idea was to provide access to information to citizens from the local area by the local population. So yeah, these are some of the examples I could.
That's great, Sunandan. There's a lot of applications. I think you must publish a compendium of all these case studies. There's so much to learn. We really don't hear about it too much. So that's phenomenal amount of work that you've done in a short period of time. So great, kudos to you. I know we are much out of time, but I see 14 questions in Q&A box and about 70 comments in the chat box. We can't take all of them. Maybe I'll take one question each for each panelist. And if it's okay with all the panelists, we can extend the session by another 10 minutes. I hope that's okay.
Sure, absolutely.
Okay, Shrikant, there's an interesting question, which I think you can take it up. It says that technology, of course, can drive financial inclusion, but what about the fact that it will expose a lot of data, about your assets, about your bank accounts, and of course, there's always a fear that the data may get misused, and there's already a lot of concerns around privacy. I think Aadhaar also had, there was a Supreme Court verdict on where Aadhaar can be used and where it can't be used. So, how do we tackle those challenges which may arise out of use of technology, and how do we protect privacy and stuff like that?
Absolutely. Well, I mean, the experience of launching Aadhaar and the Supreme Court, constitutional bench deliberating it was a great learning for the country, because it was the first adoption of a massive digital technology at India scale. So I think it was very useful for us to learn about these issues on privacy and so on, because prior to that, it was sort of like nobody understood it. I'm talking about maybe the urban elite did, but not the common man. So in that sense, I think it was a very useful debate at a country level. For like 5 years, we debated that issue. And of course, the Supreme Court made a decision. I think it was a wise decision to slow down on the use of Aadhaar in the private sector while using it for, DBT and other government access for delivery of services. But if you look at privacy itself, in India, the Sri Krishna Committee, headed by the Justice Sri Krishna, came up with recommendations which are moving towards a bill on privacy. And if you look at globally what's happened, in Europe has taken a fairly, sort of a stringent, let's say, I would even go so far as to say constrained stand on privacy, where it has sort of made it harder for businesses to actually provide services rapidly. US, on the other hand, has been sort of more casual about it, I would say, and it's sort of handed identity and stuff to private entities. Large companies are pretty much creating identity infrastructures, be it Google or Facebook and so on. So not the greatest example when you look at from a privacy point of view, and you see examples of Cambridge Analytica and others that sort of blew up, which showed the problems that come with private sector sort of doing this software infrastructure, whether it's identity or use of people's data. So I feel that India has taken a measured approach, having read the Sri Krishna Committee report on the privacy bill. I think we have to look at data both from a privacy point of view, also from an opportunity point of view. If a poor person in a rural area can use his or her data in order to get a loan, who are we sitting in urban areas to say, no, you shall not get the loan because privacy is more important than your data? So it is a debate that I think we have to look at a little bit more closely when food and jobs and access to credit are really important. Maybe we can't put our whatever ideas of privacy alone, while of course privacy has to be protected in a general way across the country through the privacy bill. So I'm sort of conflicted between privacy to ensure that it can't be misused, especially by large corporates and so on, but at the same time not go so far as to start crippling the use of data towards credit, towards other services as well. So that's the sort of the way I look at privacy, and it's yet to be seen how the privacy bill is going to affect various services in the country in the years to come.
Absolutely, Shrikant. I think very valid point. I think we need to take a pragmatic approach, as you rightly said, trade-off between opportunity and the privacy. And my experience shows, if I go to a farmer and tell him that if I can get you a loan at 7% and you can do away with your 30% interest loan, he said, take whatever you want.
Exactly.
I'm saving 8,000 rupees a year. Please take whatever data. I'm not worried. So I think we should really see it in the context of the target segments. The challenges are so much. Can we solve their pain points with the use of data rather than?
So in some sense, while we have to protect people from misuse of data, we cannot also be sort of patronizing and sort of, hey, I know the better decision for you. I worry about that. If we go to a step too far, we might actually hurt the consumer from getting what they want more desperately in some sense.
Yeah. Thanks, Shrikant. Kate, there's a question for you. Of course, there's a huge opportunity for building digital farmer success platform. But how do we curate service providers, so that we ensure certain quality of service? And I'll give you an example which I have seen in rural markets: a farmer taking soil sample to 3 different laboratories and 3 different laboratories giving 3 different results. And farmer is confused, which is the right one I should choose or rely on. And I'm sure, these instances are very common. So how do we build a curation layer? Can you throw some light on that?
Yeah, that's a great question. The quality of the content is a huge issue in agriculture, and we're definitely looking at that. And there are actually very few players out there dealing with quality. I think there's a few approaches to think about. Firstly, the starting group we can work with should be organizations that are actually experts in this topic. So if it's about soil health or soil diagnostics, they should have a lot of expertise in this area. So there needs to be a cadre of people behind this that are already producing quality content. We need both the digital modalities and the in-person modalities to get people together to curate the content, validate the content. There needs to be some kind of a validation committee, so to speak, that pumps out the content. So I think that's on the supply side. On the demand side, I think that technology has the power, obviously, to implement feedback systems. So you can get feedback from farmers as to what did you think of that content? Was it accurate? Yes or no? Did you do it? Yes or no? What happened after you did it? So there's a live way we can create that additional content, so to speak, coming back from consumers themselves. But it is a big question in agriculture that we're dealing with.
Absolutely. I think one way is, what we do when we take a Uber ride, you rate your driver, right? And things like that. And those ratings get built up over a period of time. So, a 4.9 driver is probably more reliable than a 4.1 driver, right? So I don't know that there could be some way out. We need to think more creatively, but absolutely, it's very, very, very important to build that curation layer. Otherwise, the whole purpose of DFS can go haywire. Thanks, thanks, Kate.
And just to add one more point, the Gates Foundation is really quite focused on evidence and learning as well. So one thing we try to do when we support all these initiatives is have impact evaluations running alongside. So some of them could be more light touch impact evaluations that are lean data, and other ways could be actual randomized control trials that are quite extensive, 1 to 2 year studies as to looking at the actual impact, proven impact on something. So that we try to do as well to make sure the content is high quality and the impact is actually there.
Okay, that's great. Neha, there's a question for you, and I think you addressed part of it, and I think Srikanth also gave a good example. The question is around public-private partnership opportunity. So like in hospitals, we have government hospitals, we have private hospitals. Diagnostics, we have tons of diagnostic chains in the private sector and a few in the sort of government controlled, as in government sector. What are the areas where there's a potential for collaboration, especially at the rural level, at CHC level, or, how do we build those models? I think what Srikanth mentioned with 10-bed ICUs, I think it's a great example, taking ICU beds to the rural areas and creating this infra in states like Telangana and Andhra. But what are some of those areas where we can create some successes? Or if you know some successes already, I think it'd be good to
hear. The public sector and the private sector in healthcare is motivated by the need to create profit, and to not just to break even, but to create profit. And the challenge is that there is no money to be made in healthcare in rural service delivery. Even from a unit economic standpoint, how much consumers are able to pay, it is simply not possible for private players to be able to deliver care within those costs. So that means every single service delivery intervention needs to have a government subsidy. However, there are some really interesting examples of public-private work. One of the projects that I would share is when government actually creates partnerships where they would pay for, instead of them setting up the whole infrastructure themselves, which would cost them something, they subcontract out to private providers. Like there have been examples of subcontracting out health and wellness centers to private players like Apollo or Fortis to run, where the government pays a certain flat fee per patient served, and the service provider has to deliver high quality up to a certain quality of services. So that's interesting. Those are all new models. They're still, they've not grown beyond the pilot stage, because I think the private sector is still trying to figure out whether they can make enough money in doing this. So that's one of these interesting examples. I think another big interesting space for private-public partnership is actually in vaccine delivery. And in the case of medications, like pharmaceuticals and vaccines are some of the highest, largest components of our budget. So there are interesting things that are happening there in ensuring cold chain supplies, using sensors, IoT sensors for maintaining cold chains in vaccines. So there are some examples, but I think the root problem of why there aren't more public-private partnerships is because there's the divergence on in profit sense, and those profits exist in urban markets, and that's where the private sector ends up playing more, whereas those profits in rural markets are hard to come by. No offense to CK Prahlad, but there isn't a fortune at the bottom of that pyramid.
Oh my God, we need another session to debate this, but yeah, it's a great insight. I think one example that I've seen in agriculture space of PPP is on Pradhan Mantri Fasal Bima Yojana, where the whole insurance scheme is designed by the government, and the 98% of the premium is paid by the government. But essentially, the delivery lies with the likes of Tata AIG, ICICI, Lombard, and various insurance players. In fact, a lot of startups also working on bringing in some very interesting solution on yield assessment using satellite imagery. So I think that's one area I can think of. But you're right. It's easier said than done, and we probably need to create more successes and models, which is more like win-win for both private and public sector. So thanks, Neha, for that. Sunandan, coming to you, it's the last question since we are almost over time. I think there's a very interesting question, for improving adoption of technology. do we need to identify technology champions in rural areas? So the first question is, do technology champions exist, or do we need to train them? And if yes, how do we go about it? Are there influencers in rural communities who can take the onus of taking these solutions to the masses?
I'll give you one example. I think there was a project of Google and Internet Sathi, and it reached out to 3 lakh villages in India, roughly. So one Sathi women basically was allocated 4 villages. And the idea was, first, they were being trained how to use a smartphone. And then the idea was they will use this smartphone, being digitally literate, to be able to generate livelihood for themselves. And it's a massive program, like 3 lakh, like half of India almost. That I think I'll take one more, and there's a need for that. I mean, in COVID, this vaccination, when this government opened up the website for vaccination slot booking, as an end person, if I'm a person in a village, I cannot go to that website and book the slot and in English while the website is in English. And a lot of NGOs came in, because I know that, because we work with some of them, including TRI. So TRI deployed their staff to work, assist basically in registering people on the website, helping them the slot booking. So I think, yes, it cannot be a completely independent model wherein someone will download an app and start using it. It has to be an assisted model. And it's just that the cost of identifying the champion and then capacity building, who will invest in that. The point, I think that is a challenge which Internet Sathi, Google tried to do that. And today, I think there would be out of 75,000 women who've been trained on these, I think roughly 25,000 women are still active, and they are continuing with these opportunities, digital opportunities.
Right. Thanks. No, that's a great example. I know 2 other examples. One is HESA in Andhra and Telangana, which has an army of rural entrepreneurs, about 5,000 HESATis, who work with banks to onboard farmers and work with FMCG companies to distribute their products. There's another one called Frontier Markets in Rajasthan, which works with women entrepreneurs, called Saheli, which is also driving a lot of inclusion. And it's like a social e-commerce in rural areas, which is fantastic. So yeah, clearly, I think I'm sure there are many champions in the rural areas. We need to identify them, motivate them, incentivize them, so that they can make technology more inclusive. So with that, I think we come to the end of the session, and it's been a fascinating discussion. I would have gone for another 15, 20 minutes, but I know it's a Saturday evening, and I don't want to take any more time. Kate, it's very early for you, so thanks for joining us early from Seattle. And thanks very much to Shrikant, Neha, and Sunandan. It's been a great, great discussion. And, I need not sum it up. I think every insight is great insight. All I can say, we need to be more collaborative, and we need to figure out ways how we can learn from each other. I think each one of us carries so much of experience. And there are so many cross-sectoral learnings, like healthcare and agriculture. These 2 sectors came out very strongly. There's so much to learn from each other, and hopefully apply those learnings to your sector and to your industry. So with that, I'll conclude, and thanks to all the panelists and all the participants for patient listening. And as usual, I've done a poor job of time management, so apologies for that. And with that, I hand it over to Shirish for his concluding remarks.
Thank you so much, Hemendraji. And I personally want to thank every panelist and participant on behalf of TRIF to attend this session and be with us in the extra time as well. We have had great insights. Again, as Hemendraji said, due to paucity of time, I won't sum it up, but I think the some of the greatest points that were made is how tech should be human-centered and not seen as a substitute for human intervention, and that is precisely what TRF as an agency also believes, that we kind of add value to human life rather than try and substitute it. So with that, I again thank everyone. We have collated all of your questions as well, and we'll be putting that to panelists, and we will see if we can communicate with you beyond this workshop as well. and we'll see how we can continue engaging with the great set of panelists and participants that we had today. So thank you so much, and look forward to talk to you beyond this workshop as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.